And I thought, wow, we're really killing it. And then I looked at the P&L at the end of the month, and I think we lost $60,000 that month. I think because I always focused on revenue. To me, success was revenue, and just go bigger, go harder. And that, of course, that's a big piece of success. But also, you have to keep an eye on the bottom of the bucket too, and what's leaking out. So how much it costs for that revenue.
Welcome back to another episode of Built to Finish. Today's guest has spent more than 3 decades building businesses from the ground up. His career has taken him from teaching high school mathematics to founding companies, leading growth initiatives, scaling organizations through acquisition, and helping businesses generate millions in revenue. After co-founding Forefront Innovation, he helped grow the company from startup through a successful acquisition before joining the leadership team at VIA International, where the combined organization surpassed $70 million in annual revenue. Today, he's the president of Real Content Solutions. Ivan Lightfoot, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Steven. Appreciate it.
No,
You read that bio and it makes me wonder who that guy is. Cool.
It's all you. It's all you, my friend. Yeah. So we met a while ago. I forget. I think it was Mark Hodges from Accresis that introduced us, and I was looking to get a website built. Is that how we met? Many moons ago.
That's how we met. And then I learned a little bit about you and your business and what you'd done and what you'd taken on post-acquisition or post-sale. And you were going to climb Everest, and you were involved in speaking. You have just been a busy man.
I have been, and I did go to Everest last year. Unfortunately, I didn't summit, but I still had an incredible expedition. I learned a ton, and in my book right now, that's unfinished business. So I'll be back someday.
Yeah, I like to hear that. That's great.
I know you also had some, at least serious hiking trips that you recently completed as well, right?
Well, my son and I went to Uganda to work with an organization there, and before we left, we decided to do some fun things. The organization's called Rescue One More. It's amazing. But we ended up going on a safari because I'd never been on one. So that was
nice.
Fun. We saw Murchison Falls, which was amazing. But then we decided to climb Mount Elgon. And it's not Everest. However, it is a crazy, the elevation change is 3,000 feet to close to 15,000 feet.
Okay, that's serious.
It's a Pikes Peak hike-ish, except that you're not starting at 11,000 feet and it's not a paved trail. It was brutal, but we had a good time. Steven, I prepared for that. the Stairmaster and do 100 flights a day, and felt like but what I didn't plan on, and maybe of course you probably do, far better than me. Going up was not the problem. The problem was coming back down, and my body started to give out. I just wasn't prepared for that. So
a lot of people don't train for the downhill, and the downhill is just as tough on the legs and the body as the uphill is. And it's really important to train for both.
Sure. But that was a wonderful experience. And I got to do it with my son.
That's fantastic. So going back to your roots, math teacher to entrepreneur, what was that journey like?
It's been an interesting journey. I have people tell me all the time that, that the path I've taken is not one they would have ever predicted anybody taking. And I said, yeah, include me in that. I never would have thought. I didn't think I would be a math major. It's not why I went to school. It's where I ended up. It's a long story there. Never planned to teach. Actually, when I decided to do mathematics, I was just going to, be an actuary. So I studied actuarial sciences and all these, mathematical models and applying them to these large scale moment generating function, all these craziness. And I used none of it. But I did teach math, and I love that. That was a great part of my story.
Okay. So when you were getting ready to exit Forefront, what did you do to actually prepare Forefront to be acquisition ready?
Oh, that's interesting. Just a little bit of clarity. When I taught high school, and I did that for 8 years, and I didn't really have, this is an important part of the story, I didn't really have aspirations to start a business. I never did when I was younger. I didn't grow up in an environment where college was even something we should do. I just decided to go. And then I ended up teaching, and I loved it. And I thought, oh, this is a great career. And then I found myself at 34 years old. I got 2 children at the time. I have more now, but, and I was broke. Wow. And my future business partner was in the residential audio video world. So he installed, I say audio video, we call it AV, but it's residential custom digital integration. So we install lighting control systems and automated shades and drapes and audio systems and home theaters. So he was in that space. And essentially I talked him into starting a business, not with me, on his own. I said, you really should do this. I think you've got you've obviously got the technical acumen, and I think you got the drive. And he had an entrepreneurial spirit, and he goes, that's great. Yeah, I think I'm going to do it. and I want you to do it with me. And
I drag you right in.
whoa, I don't know about that. So I did decide to go into that space with them, not knowing anything about business. Now, there are some things, and Steven, some of those preface questions that you sent, I thought a lot about how teaching prepared me for business. And really what it really did is it taught me a lot about people. So, the element that, every student learns differently. So sometimes I have to apply the message to that student and make them create an environment where they can be successful, and people are motivated differently. So, in a classroom, if a student doesn't understand, you can't just repeat it or say it louder. You have to change. You have to adapt.
Wait a second, that doesn't work?
That doesn't work, right? It taught me a lot of patience. It taught me some things that definitely helped with the next career that I never thought it would. So for years, I said, man, I wasted 8 years of my life teaching when I should have jumped into business. So, I'm 54, but I always tell people I feel like I'm 46, right? In the business realm, and it's not just energy. It's just my mind I don't have all that scar tissue yet. I haven't done it as long as a lot of people my age have.
You'll get there.
I'll get there. That's right.
It's coming.
It's coming. But so we start this business and back to your question of what made, Forefront ready for acquisition. It never was even in our mind that we would be considering acquisition. We were literally just two guys trying to start a business, lifestyle business, to make money to feed our family. And then because of the things I learned, one thing we were really good at, because I didn't know the first thing about the audio video world, but for some reason, I did have a knack for going out getting clients and getting clients that would feed us a lot of business. So not just end users, primarily builders and designers and realtors that would refer us business. And all I really did was make friends with people. But it worked out well for us. However, I remember our first 2 or 3 years into the business, we had a really good month, and it was December. And we threw a big Christmas party, and we brought in tables for poker and blackjack, and we just had this big, and I thought, wow, we're really killing it. And then I looked at the P&L at the end of the month, and I think we lost $60,000 that month, which to us was brutal.
Because of the party?
Yeah, it's terrible. And I'm like, what am I doing wrong? So
wait a second, you're the math guy. So I assume you were the finance guy for the company as well.
Well, yeah, yes, and I did a very poor job of that. I think because I always focused on revenue. To me, success was revenue, and just go bigger, go harder. And that, of course, that's a big piece of success. But also, you have to keep an eye on the bottom of the bucket too, and what's leaking out. So how much it costs for that revenue. But what really changed for us is I just met Mark Hodges, who you mentioned earlier. He was a client that I dealt I guess maybe I spent 15 minutes with him total when he became a client, because I dealt with other people in his camp that were helping him to transition from primary residence in Los Angeles back to Texas. And he was busy. So he was working through he was selling a company and working through a lot of life things at the same time. So essentially, I became his audio video guy, but I didn't really work with him. I worked with other people on his team. And he finally moved back to Texas. My first real interaction with Mark was he called me and he said he'd lived in Texas previously and he had a home here and he wanted to use some of the equipment for a new project he was building also in Texas. And so he said if I thought it'd be okay if we found a crew that could take some of this equipment out of his house so we could use it, repurpose it for later. And I said, sure, Mr. Hodges, anytime. When would you like to get this done? He's like, well, you got time this afternoon? It's a Friday afternoon. So I found a guy in the shop and we went and we started to spend a lot of time with Mark and we did the install. And very quickly I realized, wow, this guy is A, very sharp and B, also would always take the time to explain things to me about the business, about how he felt about my proposal, about how he felt about the install, about what he felt about the industry.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Mark Hodges is one of the co-founders of Accresis, and Accresis is a sponsor of this show. And I work with Mark Hodges on various projects, and we specialize in helping middle market founders find their way to their finish line via a strategic exit or majority investor recapitalization. So that's Mark Hodges. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it's and in my case in particular, I'm not sure if it's the case for other people on the podcast very often, but that is exactly what Mark Hodges did for us. So he called me up one night. We had dinner after his installation and we talked through things. And he said he was interested in the space that we were in. And he gave me, you don't have to put this one on the podcast if you want to, but he gave me basically a business prospectus for a company that I was looking at in our space in residential custom automation and home theater and audio video world. And I looked at it. And I didn't know the first thing about really running a business. Again, math teacher turned small business owner. We're doing okay because we can sell a lot, but we really don't know what we're doing. I'm looking through it, and the first number was a revenue line, and that revenue was about twice the business that we were doing. So instantly, I disqualify myself from the conversation.
Okay.
And get to know Mark, great guy. And then that night, after we had our discussions, and he was talking about active investment, passive investment, all these different things. But again, it's a little bit over my head. I went home that night and got on Google, and I started looking up all these acronyms that I'd never seen before because I didn't go to business school. I
What
was a
what
math
what does
major.
EBITDA stand for?
Exactly. Yeah. Not only is what it, but what is amortization? So it was great. And I'd had a little crash course, and I was very intrigued. And I called Mark back somewhat naively and said, "Hey, Mark, I've really looked at this company that you laid out for me, and I think it would be a bad investment based on what I'm seeing. And here's the problems." And I'm talking to Mark Hodges, and for the listeners, like this man knows the business inside and out. And so he just kind of chuckled and he said, "Ivan, have you ever thought about taking on an investor?" And I'm like, "Get it. And we did. We took Mark on as an investor, an active investor.
Okay.
And he turned into my mentor, my business coach. And I tell people all the time, the man completely changed my life.
Amazing.
He made me think differently about my business, about life in general, about what could be accomplished. You think about those things like, as a man thinketh, so he is. He
Sure.
completely changed my thinking. And so what made his acquisition ready? He did. He taught us all this stuff. I mean, we were two heroes running a business, and he's like, heroes don't scale systems. You got to be predictable. You got to be repeatable. You got to build relationships. I started taking clients out to dinner. I started going to events where, our target clientele were at.
Right.
We worked on culture, and I thought we had a strong culture, but we didn't. In fact, Mark, one time he said, when I think about you and the way you run your business with your team, what I picture is like all these little birds in a nest, and here's the mama bird. That's Ivan feeding all the little birds. And I'm like, that doesn't sound good, Mark. He said, it's not good. Like you need to train people up to do the work with you. In fact, you'll be successful when you can take a two-week vacation and no one knows that you were gone, So I'm like,
Yep.
we're far from that. So, but ultimately, it was a lot of out-of-the-box thinking. We did very clever things because we took time to really ponder, not just head down, but head up. We took time to ponder, how can we really get entrenched? And we were in Houston, Texas. That's where we started. We ended up expanding. But how can we get entrenched in the ecosystem that equals business for us and the right type of business? And that's builders and architects and designers. And so for really, multi-million high-end homes. And so we did things like we called ourselves the Houston Dream Team, where we connected with the high-end paint contractor and the highest end landscape, contractor. And
That's a great go-to-market strategy for a company in your space.
Amazing.
Fantastic.
I felt like we'd sit in these meetings and discuss between all of us, we could refer anybody else to any project going on in Houston. And we knew about every construction project that was worth knowing about. So if Sebastian Construction were building a $14 million house in River Oaks, one of us knew how to get in. So we just helped each other out. And then it was amazing. But I think mostly with Mark, it was about belief. We had so many what would it take discussions. And this leads back to us being acquisition ready. The what if discussions would be, if we're doing, our average installation is, $200,000, $150,000, how do we make it $1 million? And it's like, at first people just kind of chuckle and we're sitting with the team. It's like, well, then you start answering the question. It'd have to be a big house. Okay. Had to be the right client. Okay. We'd have to do all the things that we do in that house, lighting control and shading and theater and the whole 9 yards. It's like, okay. And then we got to the point where like, wow, we could do $1 million installations. It's like, yeah. So little quick exercise. Then Mark takes it one step further. How do we do $1 billion in revenue? And we're like, did you mean to say billion? Well, 1,000 of what we just said. How do we do that?
With this pinky in his mouth of $1 billion.
Well, and here's what's crazy though. Then one of my project managers is like, well, we couldn't just be in Houston. We'd have to expand, right? And it's like, well, we'd have to have really good pricing and marketing so that we could get geared. And then next thing you know, it just opened our mind to it. And when we did, then we started putting things in place with Mark's tutelage that would help us to scale efficiently and effectively. We got so efficient and so effective that we were courted by a company in California and eventually bought. So it's great.
That's an incredible journey, but you proved a point that I make continuously, and it sounds self-serving, but it's so true that in order to truly scale and realize a successful exit, the most important advisor you can have by your side is somebody that's actually been in your shoes and has done it from a founder, entrepreneurial level. Investment bankers are great, lawyers are great, accountants are great, but unless they've personally, run, sailed, and sold a company, they're not your optimal advisor.
I agree with that.
Awesome. So how long did you stay on with the acquiring company?
So we were acquired in anticipation of a larger merger. So we were acquired, and then within a year, we merged with 6 other firms across the Western US. So, and then I stayed on for, that was 2000. So for 3.5, 4 more years. So
Okay. So was this like a typical private equity roll up type?
it wasn't really a roll up. It really was like a group of 6 sharing best practices and trying to scale on our own without taking any money up front. So
Okay.
in
Interesting.
retrospect, it would have been better to take money up front. But at that point, I was a smaller player because of the companies that merged, my unit in Texas was the smallest one. So,
Gotcha.
which was great for me. It felt phenomenal for my team to think that, our team is in all the top zip codes on the West Coast.
That's amazing. That's a great growth and exit story. So during that period of growth, and for anybody listening that may be going through a merger acquisition or integration into a bigger organization, what were some of the biggest challenges that you guys faced when you were acquiring and integrating these other companies?
Hey everyone, just a quick reminder that the Built to Finish podcast is brought to you by Accresis. Accresis have helped over 30 founders generate over $1 billion in wealth via strategic acquisitions or investor recapitalizations. If you're the owner of a middle market company and want to explore what a potential exit will look like for you so that you can finally realize the value of what you've been working so hard on, please do contact Accresis via the website accresis.com or hit me up on LinkedIn for more information at Steven Pivnik. Now, back to the show.
Sure. Especially getting acquired, there was a lot of operational issues and integration. And there was, the way we did things maybe wasn't the way that the company that was acquiring us did things. But I think the most important thing was to keep my team on board. Communication was more important than ever.
Okay.
I really, I think I did a good job, but I wish I would even spent more time preparing my team beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
Because people are going to ask, what does this mean for me? And change creates that uncertainty that, we all feel. So I had to do a lot of coaching on a very personal level. But yeah, we did a pretty good job of maintaining our culture.
Another place where your teaching experience came in handy.
I think so. And other questions would come up like, if you're going through a transition, sometimes you think, okay, so we're the smaller entity here and there's going to be a new entity moving forward, which is essentially an acquisition, but we have a lot to offer and we had value and that's why we're being acquired. And sometimes I think we just assume that, bigger entities, the expert. Maybe they are, but there's a reason they're acquiring you. You have value. So you got to speak up because sometimes you know the answer. And other times you're supposed to listen, absorb, and learn, So
Sure. Yeah. I had a client ask me yesterday, I was actually advising them to hire a professional CFO. They're like, what's the point? We're going to be acquired in 3 years and the acquiring company is definitely going to have a CFO and ours will get canned. I'm like, no, do not make that assumption. To your point, that's not always the fact that the acquiring company staff replaces all of your senior staff. It always depends.
That's right. So just be really, really good at what you do. And if that's the reason you're acquired, then it could be some of the best decisions you've ever made for the people that work for you too. So,
yep.
So many careers have started.
So you mentioned communications was key. What do you think are some of the biggest communication mistakes that founders make?
That's good. It's funny. If you were to ask my wife, she says, I will say things sometimes and she'll say, you always assume that people are thinking the way that you are, and you shouldn't do that. So I will maybe under communicate or just assume that based on that if people are thinking the way I'm thinking, that when I communicate something, that everybody's going to react the way I expect them to react because they're thinking just like me. It doesn't always work that way. So I think that's a kind of a big piece of it.
Yep, I agree. A lot of people suffer from that. I totally agree with your answer. And I'm probably guilty of that as well. Like, what do you mean they don't understand what I just said? It's clear.
Right.
It's clear as glass in my mind. So a very interesting hop from, math teacher to the audiovisual space. And then you get into real content solutions. How did that come about? And if you don't mind, explain what Real Content Solutions does.
Sure. So Real Content Solutions is a digital marketing company, and we essentially are outsourced digital marketing arm of the companies that we work for. We work in multiple verticals, so it's not vertical specific. However, we see ourselves as storytellers. So for our clients, we like to tell their stories in such a way that it creates value to their potential clientele. So very strategic marketing company. But well, people ask about the details. What are the details? Do you create websites? Do SEO and AEO operations? Do you write blogs? Do you create video content? I mean, the answer is yes, we do it all. But really, the value of RCS is we're the ones that strategize that and then make sure that everything is put into place that it happens.
I mean, huge need for that. And what I see, and you probably see this as well, would love to get your opinion on this. There's so many people and companies and brands that are doing it wrong, and they're literally just like throwing mud up against the wall to see like what sticks. Is that something
Yeah,
you're witnessing as well? And is that a typical customer at the beginning of their engagement with you?
it really is. And here's the other thing. I'm not going to claim that we have all the answers. In fact, I will say this. If anybody in the digital marketing space says we know exactly the formula to make this work, hey, then be skeptical because the formula changes continually.
Of course.
So, the metrics change continually, the tools change continually. And so I will say this, for us, everything's a constant A/B test, and we're constantly poking and prodding. The differentiator for us is we feel like we're really part of our client's team. So we're thinking through these things. In fact, if I can find it, there's something I'd love to read to you. But
Yeah, sure.
uh, there's this level of here's the game plan for marketing, what we should do. And it's become so, the clients that think they're doing it right say, we're doing all these things. And you look at it, it either looks terrible or has no they're checking all the boxes, but it doesn't really tell their story at all. That can be a problem. Or the use of AI. AI is a big thing now. So, it's a wonderful tool. It is. I mean, we use AI a lot. But, we're in danger of being AI lemmings and all telling the same story if we're not careful, at least telling it in the same way. So, because we want to be different like everybody else, But so there's so actually let me see if I can. One of my employees recently, and this will tell you what I think about marketing and what I think about our company and where I think marketing is going because of AI. So my operations manager recently, we're talking about our branding for our business for Real Content Solutions, and she's talking to Claude, her friend Claude, and basically Claude knows about us. One thing I love about AI is it's pretty honest. So that's great. But anyway, so she's talking through it about this new brand identity and who we are versus typical marketing. And I think it'll tell that not just a differentiator for us, but what's important in marketing moving forward. So this is Claude's quote. The narrative that AI is going to make marketing agencies obsolete misses something important, which is exactly what you've captured in this brand story. AI is a tool. It doesn't know your client's business. It doesn't build relationships. It doesn't notice when something feels off brand. And it definitely doesn't pick up the phone when a client is stressed about a campaign that isn't performing. Those things require human judgment, trust, and accountability. What I think makes RCS specifically well-positioned is the account manager model. The one point of contact, I know your business and I'm in your corner relationship is genuinely hard to replicate with AI or without it. Small business owners are overwhelmed, not just with marketing, but with everything, which Steven leads to that point of sometimes they're not doing it right just because it's the other thing they have to do. Marketing is
100%. Mm-hmm.
Having someone who takes something off their plate and strategically thinks about it is very important. That's not a commodity. The agencies that are going to struggle are the ones that were just executing tasks with no strategic layer. If your value was we write blogs, AI is a real threat. But if your value is we think about your business holistically and make smart decisions on your behalf, which is what you've built here, that's a different conversation entirely. So the marketing, are people doing it wrong? Maybe. And some people are doing it. Some people are killing it, but killing it today doesn't mean you're going to kill it tomorrow. You always have to have that strategic layer. You always got to be looking to the future. You always got to be figuring out the best way to tell your story and who you're going to tell it to. And then use these tools that we have, these amazing new tools in order to tell that story and reach the people that you want to reach.
That is so true. So there's going to be at least one listener who runs a digital marketing agency who I think is going to benefit tremendously from everything that you just said.
Yeah. Yeah.
At least one, and hopefully many others. I mean, everything that you just described really applies to, so many services practices, right? Because you can easily say AI will replace accountants, lawyers, business advisors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything that you just mentioned applies to us and the others I just mentioned as much as it applies to you.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think right now I'm fascinated with AI and the things it can do and MCP servers to tie all my different softwares together. And, it's just amazing. I don't even need Zapier. But the reality is it is just a tool. That's all it is. Because otherwise, it's not just the impetus to start these amazing projects that we're doing using AI, but who's going to really evaluate it?
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to really make sure that it's a phenomenal tool, but it's not moving the needle for us. I'm still not getting the meetings. I'm still not getting the sales. I'm still not getting in front of the architects, builders, and designers if I'm in the AV industry, or the business owners who are struggling and trying to scale, but they're stuck at, a $10 million revenue number and they can't get their EBITDA above 5%. It doesn't do that human part, which is always going to be important.
Sales and growth. What is your current constraint in growing your own business, and how are you solving it?
Sure. I think for us, because of the model that I just described, we're not just checking boxes. While what we do to be a repeatable process, we have to have the right people on board. We have to build the right team. And we've taken a lot of time to cultivate that team.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we're in a great place now. And we could manage a lot of contracts and a lot of different verticals. But that has been the slowest growth, is investing in people. Investing in process is great, but for us specifically, investing in people has been very important too. And otherwise, the sky's the limit, Steven, for us.
I mean, there's an incredibly high demand for people with these skill sets because, everybody is trying to do a better job with their online presence. And like, as we both violently in agreement, a lot of people aren't doing it right and they're looking for help.
Sure. So, and then there's the sales piece, which I've kind of been our primary salesman. So that's a bottleneck, but the usual struggles with growth for me, and I'm a people person. I mean, I like to develop talent. That's kind of what I, make people do what Mark Hodges did for me. So in other words, show them a version of themselves that they don't even see yet and develop that. So that's taken us some time, but I feel like we're there now.
Awesome. So what advice would you give an entrepreneur that's building for the long term?
Boy. I hate to just keep going back to Mark Hodges.
That's totally fine.
I think my first thing when I talk to people and I talk to
Get an advisor that's been in your shoes before.
Yeah. People that, someone that's going through what I went through when I went through it with Mark. But one of the things he always said was, I would tell people, become a founder, be a founder. And so someone once told me, we love entrepreneurs. They're kind of cute, but founders have a different level of grit and determination, And to Mark, what he said is everybody's got brilliant ideas, but not everybody can put those ideas into practice and make them become profitable. So, I would say, start with your vision, communicate it, and be prepared to work hard. And when I say work hard, sometimes as a business owner, we always say those things. I think I mentioned earlier, that sometimes the urgent outweighs the important, but you got to keep your eyes on the important, otherwise you won't grow. But that doesn't mean you can skip the urge. It just means you have to work harder. So be prepared to work hard, build a team that shares your vision and that work ethic. Always make decisions that you're going to be proud of 10 years from now. I believe in doing it the right way. Let's see. If you screw up, I would say dust yourself off and get back in the game, right? Just be grateful that you learned something. Like you mentioned, I mean, if you scrape your knees up, then, well, you're wiser now. So move on with that knowledge. It's not always going to be, if I'm an entrepreneur, I think I'll realize pretty quickly that it's not always going to be smooth sailing. It's going to be hard, but we can do hard things. And then also, I didn't mention this yet, but growing your network is huge. And that's another thing that my business coaches have always taught me.
Mm-hmm.
I got into the music industry. So we have two businesses. I do have Real Content Solutions and another one called Conveyor Management, and we manage country music artists.
Really? Okay.
And when I got into this 11 years ago, both of them at the same time, I knew nothing of the industry. In fact, the guy that hired me first, who's a touring artist, he said, well, I don't want a fanager, I want a manager. And I'm glad you're not in this industry. And so it sounds real good, except I literally didn't know anything about publishing I didn't know anything. I asked for an org chart and a P&L. And the P&L was a disaster. And the org chart, they just laughed at me. So I didn't know tour manager versus booking agent. I didn't know anything. So, but what I was able to do was continue to make connections and in that industry and just listen and learn from people. And now we've been doing it for 11 years. We have multiple bands. One of our bands just signed a major label record deal with Sony Music. So nice. From nothing to that, and the only thing I did right was continue to connect with people and continue to listen and continue to learn.
Relationships are huge. And it's really, really good advice because sometimes there's just so many balls up in the air. You don't have time to proactively go and continue to build a network. But oh my God, it pays off in spades down the road.
Repeatedly too. I had one guy tell me once, he said, I am selling different, my whole career, I've just been selling different things to the same people.
Mm-hmm.
Because he just made this huge base of connections and it just continues to work for him because he always knows who he needs to reach out to. So, which leads to another thought, like another pearl of wisdom from Mark Hodges. He said, never do anything that would act against your own self-interest. And I didn't really know what he meant. So explaining further, don't do or say anything that you're going to regret later, because you never know who you're going to be working with in the future. So end every relationship well, always take the high road. All those things aren't just cliche. It's true. Things that are cliche had profound meaning at one point. They just got overused, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
that high road and not acting against your own self-interests and just making sure you treat people right is because, someone could be a competitor today, but they're on your team in a few years. You just never know. So
Exactly. Sage advice. Ivan, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show today. You have an incredibly interesting, highly diversified background, filled with obviously ups and downs, many more ups and downs. Thank you for sharing all of your advice with the viewers and listeners today. If anybody wants to get hold of you or learn more information about either of these companies, what's the best way?
I think you can find us at realcontentsolutions.com or Lightfoot at realcontentsolutions.com, or just seek me out on LinkedIn. Reach me that way.
Awesome. We'll put that information in the show notes. Thank you again for taking the time to be on the show today.
Sure, absolutely. My pleasure. Next time we'll turn it around because I think you're way more interesting. And next time I ask the questions.
We'll definitely do this again. I would love to have you back as a repeat guest. And this is Mark Hodges' new favorite episode. I'm sure, at least it will be as soon as it drops in a couple of weeks.
That's great. Well, he deserves it. So
cool. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in to another episode of Built to Finish. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do like and subscribe. It helps the show tremendously. Thank you very much for tuning in, and until next time.
That's a wrap for this episode of Built to Finish. Thank you for tuning in. For show notes and more details, head over to podcast.stevenpivnik.com. Special thank you to our sponsor, Acresis, offering tailored, high-impact advisory services that help founders get to their finish line with a strategic acquisition or majority investor recapitalization. Catch you next week.